Enterprises today are using hundreds of SaaS applications. Are you reaping their productivity and innovation benefits, or are you lost in the sprawl? Enter Savvy Security. They help you surface every SaaS app, identity, and risk, so you can shine a light on shadow IT and risky identities. Savvy monitors your entire SaaS attack surface to help you efficiently eliminate toxic risk combinations and prevent attacks. So go on, get savvy about SaaS and harness the productivity benefits. Fuel innovation while closing security gaps. Visit securityweekly.com/savvy to learn more. Did you know that Active Directory is exploited in 9 out of 10 cyber attacks? With access to Active Directory, attackers can gain control of your network. To keep attackers out, you need to find and fix Active Directory security gaps. Meet Purple Knight, a free security assessment tool that scans your environment for hundreds of vulnerabilities and helps you fix the problems. Ready to reduce your Active Directory attack surface? Download Purple Knight, the #1 Active Directory security vulnerability assessment tool. Visit securityweekly.com/Sempiris.
Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices or reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques, plus an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. Google has announced that they will be shutting down the Google Podcast platform in mid-2024. To ensure that you don't lose access to any of the great Security Weekly content, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast feed on an alternative platform, such as Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or any of those great other podcast providers out there. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to find the buttons to subscribe to each of our shows now, including Business Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners, join the digital identity community at the Aria Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, May 28th to 31st. The 15th annual Identiverse will bring together over 3,000 security professionals for 4 days of world-class learning, engagement, and entertainment. As a community member, receive 25% off your Identiverse 2024 tickets using code IDV24-SW25. Register today at securityweekly.com/IDV2024. All right, gentlemen, articles for the week. A really good selection of articles this week. I was a little excited. I actually have 7 in there. I usually try to limit to 6. But just some really interesting articles. So first one, the board's pivotal role in steering cybersecurity. So obviously, when I go through these articles, they put things in a specific order. And I always defer to Jason to tell me whether that order is correct.
Well, so first and foremost, I think part of the items that were listed in this article aren't necessarily purview of the board. Things like ensuring that interdepartment coordination is happening.
Right.
I don't think the board's going to be doing that, right? Learning from industry threat landscape, sure. If you have the CISO there to help educate and sit there at the board and be part of that conversation, okay, sure, I get that. So, I looked at this article and I read through it, and the first thing I said is, I think ChatGPT wrote this. And then, secondly, I started thinking, all right, I don't think this is necessarily full board activities that they're going to be doing on the daily. So, yeah, I don't know. I found this article interesting and not necessarily all board activities. How about that?
Yeah, or helpful. And there's a couple things in here I think that are interesting tidbits, right?
Sure.
Recognizing, prioritizing cyber risk. I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but the board does have to prioritize cyber risk and have to ask about cyber risk. So I think that is an important board conversation. I also think understanding or learning the industry threat landscape. Now, some may or may not know the nuances of the cyber risk landscape, But understanding, is my industry prone or susceptible to some of these cybersecurity risks? Probably a good idea if you're sitting on the board, right?
Uh,
But then when
I
you
agree.
start getting, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I can agree with that, Matt. But the way this is written is it's almost as if, and believe me, having a cyber expert on the board, I think, is an important thing. But it's written as if you were a cyber expert on the board, right? So not all board members are going to be experts in cybersecurity.
Right.
And I think in order to build a strong relationship with the CISO, there should be conversations around threat landscape with the CISO of your organization or your chief risk officer or someone who's in the organization, who's in the business, and you're able to collaborate on that. Because if they're just going out to the industry, listen, I see CEOs do this all the time. Hey, I saw this thing on the news. Are we secure? We don't want those conversations, right?
Right.
We want business centric threat conversations around our business.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
why I thought that. Go ahead, Ben.
I would just say it's a weird kind of bifurcated thing, right? So half of it is I don't understand this cyber stuff at all, and I don't know what the heck's going on, and what are you talking about? And the other side is I saw this one really weird article, and I delved deep into it, and now I'm scared about this one thing, and I'm asking you uber technical questions that I know I can't perceive, and so like you're trying to answer both of those things, and I think the board, what you should hopefully expect for the board is they understand where cyber fits in the rest of the priorities of risk for the organization. And then as a CISO, hopefully what they've done is hired you to to give them guidance on where the investment should be to mitigate that risk. And hopefully they're giving you insights as to how that investment squares with all the other investments they have to make,
And Ben,
right?
to help them do their job, which is a good point in here, set the vision for cybersecurity, set the
Yeah,
investment track for that, those
and
type
I
of
wanted to
things,
call
right?
out like the vision is really like it's important here. It's not like, hey, you guys need to go put more firewalls in.
Right.
Like that's not the vision for
Right.
cybersecurity, right?
Exactly.
The vision for cybersecurity is, hey, everybody else in the damn company, cyber is an important part of this business and will remain so. And as such, I need you to support the CISO, right? Like everything he says isn't going to happen just because he says it is, but I need you not to fight him on everything because it just conflicts with your priorities. Like
Right.
cyber is an important priority of the business. That's the vision that you're hoping the board sets.
Right. You're hoping. And you
You're
hope
hoping.
they're and you hope they're hiring a CISO that can actually facilitate that, which
Mhm.
leads into my second article. IT leaders hiring CISOs aplenty, but don't fully understand the role. Probably because IT shouldn't be hiring the CISO.
Exactly. You stole my thunder. That was like my top note in bold.
Yeah, that's the most aggravating part of that article, but at the same time I actually don't see this like in the market, like when I talk to people out there, right? Recruiters,
Yep.
what's going on. I'm not seeing a bunch of CISOs being hired right now, right? Which I actually find very strange. And there's not a lot of movement in amongst CISOs right now.
Yeah.
So the market is really weird, which dovetails into a later article about the lack of hiring going on.
Right.
Yep.
But yeah, the market is a very strange place right now. But to get back to I think to your point, Jason's your obvious annoyance too. Yeah, CISOs don't fit in IT. Like that's not the job.
In the insane part of this article, guys, is that almost 30% of these folks that they polled said that CISOs are there to be a scapegoat in difficult situations. I was
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then
It's
the other
the
one
stat
was
I
that they
pulled
had
out.
it was like over 20%. They had too much legal and operational
Operational. Yeah, that's what I was going
responsibility.
to. Yeah. Setting up a clash with other departments. Like
Come on now.
Again, let's go back to the first article. Like, how about some board guidance here?
Right.
Like, to step in and say,
That's right.
this is the role, right? Because CISOs are thought of as a subunit of IT, just deliver availability. We're not about availability.
Article proves it.
Yeah.
Right. No, absolutely proves it. And the stats in here are scary, but we've been talking about this forever, guys. Right? I mean, but this is how the role is actually being used some days across these environments. And it just, how long does this take to for us to stop doing the same stuff we've been doing, which is hiring CISOs under the IT, not giving them the purview that they need, not aligning them to the board. You wonder why that 27% of them think they're just there to be a scapegoat.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, the habit of decades, and we're not changing it.
Nope, not changing it. The bottom of that article, ignore it. All right. It's like a security and awareness training pitch.
Yeah,
And
right.
like, forget it. All the top stuff, all the good stuff was in the top part of that article, by the way. All right. So next article, CISO-CEO communication gap continue to undermine cybersecurity. Absolutely.
Yep.
What's interesting, so this came from Qualys' CEO, Sumedh Thakar. Obviously, Ben and I have a lot of history with Sumedh.
Our former boss.
Yep, former boss, both of us. Also, Richard Syerson's in here, and I've interviewed Richard on this show a couple times with Doug Hubbard on risk management. What he says in this article and what Richard says in this article is 100% accurate. What I wanted, though, and they didn't go here, and look, if Sumedh or Richard want to come on here, I'll have them on anytime, is what should people be doing? What are those things they should be communicating, right? They say think like a CEO, right? And I've been harping on this, as you guys know, for a little while now around risk quantification, dollars and cents, speaking the language of the business. They didn't quite go there. And I was hoping that this article would, to get people to stop thinking about vulnerability scores, risk scores, and start thinking about quantified risk as a metric to have these conversations with the CEO and the board, and they didn't quite go there.
No, they really stayed high level on the surface. I mean, the only two places that I took note that they did, but it was literally just a snippet, right? Where, CISO should communicate ROI of security initiatives. Okay, fine. Now you're articulating that to the business. And then they had one section where they talked about translate technical risk into business impact. That was pretty much it as far as what CISOs could be having conversations around. Obviously, they did highlight the need for us to be speaking to the business in the language of the business. But really, those were the only two areas they brushed upon it lightly.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a little bit different tack with this. So if we look back at the previous article about hiring a bunch of CISOs, right? I've seen a lot of opportunities where CISOs have been hired, but they're not CISOs, right? They're director, right? Maybe even manager level. I've seen some stuff where it's like, we're hiring a CISO and it's 130,000 a year, and you're like, well, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a CISO. Like, there's no way in heck. So, if you merge that with this article and you think about the ways in which the business is, in a way, treating CISOs, right? And we're basically saying, hey, stay off in the IT land, like deal with technical stuff, like don't come to the C-level staff meeting. Don't come to the board meeting. Like CISOs aren't getting the visibility into what's going on in the business to be able to understand how to have those conversations, one. And then if they know how to have those conversations, they don't have the visibility into the business to understand what the levers they can pull are, right?
No.
So I think, look, as a CEO, you should partner up with your CISO. You should have some discussions and like go to dinner once a month with him, right? And have discussions that have nothing to do with security. Talk about the business. Talk about what's going on. Talk about why you're making investment strategies in sales and what you're looking for out of it and why that's an impediment to increase revenue. And talk about like what's happening on the finance side, right? Like involve the CISO. And I think you'll see marked changes in the response you get back because the connection will be made between what actually the business is trying to do and how security can be a motivation for them.
Yeah. And you're dead on, Ben. I mean, it's the conundrum that their hiring practices are creating. Their hiring practices are they're bringing in uber technical, less business focused folks who, like you said, could be more of a technical director side of the aisle, right? But then the expectation is for them to be able to speak the business. Well, no, if you're gonna hire at that level, then you need to mentor up.
That's right.
Right? You need to mentor up and get those folks skilled up into the business. If not, if you don't want to be mentoring, then you need to invest in a true business leader, a CISO. That's the conundrum is they want to hire on the cheap, not mentor and have high expectations. Well, no, that's not going to work. That's a failure ready to happen.
And I don't know how you determine return on investment without calculating risk, without
Mhm.
quantifying
Yeah,
risk, right?
right.
Because I'm spending money. The only way to prove return on investment is, am I spending less than I'm reducing in risk to justify the spend? But yet we don't go down the risk quantification question. We just
Yeah.
keep punting this thing down the
Mhm.
road. And to me, that's the foundation, is if we can't put risks in terms of dollars and cents, we're never going to be able to talk about
Yeah.
return on investment, because all it's going to be is maybe cost avoidance or whatever, but it's
Mhm.
not going to be return on investment. I'll tell you that.
No, and again, it all starts from the top because it has to be driven from the top. That culture of wanting to see cybersecurity risk, right, as quantified risk needs to come to from the top. It has to,
Yeah.
And
and
even
if
in like super simple context, right? Like, okay, you want to show an ROI and how this is increasing your bottom line and your revenue. Well, if you're not having the CISO having conversations with the sales team and having them integrated in those larger discussions at the business level, you'll never have an ROI because they can't actually participate. They can't help, right?
Right.
They're being kept at an arm's length. And that's,
does the
I
CISO
can't tell you
even
how many,
understand? Ben, does the
so
CISO
frustrating.
understand the business goals, the strategic business goals? Has the
Yeah.
CISO seen the strategic business plan? How are they going to know what to align to if they don't know what the goals of the organization are? They
Yep.
have to have the strategic plan in front of them to be able to do that and get educated on it. Even be part of the process. Who would think? Be part of the process of building it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I'm about halfway through my objective KR risk scenario mapping. I'm
Nice.
not done yet, folks, but I will get there. And when I do, it's going to be the uber alignment. Like anybody who's going to like, all right, well, based on this objective and these key results, what are the top risks I should think about from a cyber
Mhm.
perspective? I'm
Exactly
going to have
it.
them mapped out. Yeah. Yeah. Next article gets into this a little more. Again, I'll defer to Jason on some of the order here, but how do we simplify the language and steer in kind of what are the strategies for simplifying this to non-technical audiences? And again, this goes back to understand the business,
Mhm.
right? Don't use complex technical terms because they're not going
Yeah.
to understand it. That's why I think risk quantification is so darn important, because I can put it into terms that the business understands. That's obviously number one in the strategy is talking, is how to simplify this stuff. But any other tidbits in this next article,
I'll
Jason?
always bubble it up to probably the top three is the ability to tell a story. I
Mm.
think that's huge for a leader, and that's got to be up there in the top three. I mean, in order to simplify and get rid of the jargon, be able to tell a good story. In order to be able to speak the language of the business, you need to know your audience and be able to tell a good story. So that one's going to bubble up toward the top for me always. I think it's a
Yeah, I think
huge skill to
visualization.
have.
Yeah, I think visuals are important here, not complex visuals, folks. It's simple stuff,
Yeah, it has
right?
to be. It
Has to be
has to be, but you
simple.
have to tell a story around those visualizations. Because if you
Right,
can't tell a story
exactly.
around the visualizations, it's just a graph on a slide that people are
Yes,
going to
I know.
ignore. They're going to glaze over. I'm telling you.
I know. I know.
Yeah,
What do you
look,
think I
you have to make it a story, and you have to have it be compelling, and you have to have it
Mhm.
align and to your something to your audience can comprehend and take in, right? And then have a discussion about,
Mhm.
right? I think the best thing to do is foster some two-way communication, right? If you're talking for 59 minutes out of a 60-minute presentation, you've missed the mark on that, right? You want
100%.
to engage. I thought like some of the things in here, like stay clear of complex terms. I mean, phishing and online scams, okay, firewall and a digital security barrier, like I that fell flat for me, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not like you're using more words to describe a topic that generally most people have heard of before in the business world. So like I don't overthink this stuff, right? Keep it to
Mhm.
3 or 4 slides for an executive audience, right? Keep it simple.
Mhm.
Dialogue and have a story that you're telling that gets to your point, right? Articulate where you want to go, not what you're doing.
Yeah, when I was redesigning our executive dashboard, there were three things I wanted to tell in the story. Three simple things. Based on our industry size and employees, here is what actual loss looks like of our industry peers, right? My inherent risk. If you think about it, very simply, quantified in dollars. These are my top 5. Based on the work we've done, here's what we look like compared to that. And if there's areas outside of that where we're doing worse, here's what I propose we do to fix it with return on investment identified in those metrics. Like, that's a very simple story to tell in a risk, in kind of a risk dashboard. That's how I think about these things. Like, if you could articulate those 3 things very simply, I think they're extremely powerful for executives in the board.
I mean, early on in my leadership career, I kind of took some advice from a really, really seasoned marketing person. They said, listen, you want to tell a good story and you want to make it impactful, talk about the pain, talk about the claim, talk about the gain. Right? Here's the pain that the industry is experiencing in our vertical, companies our size, blah, 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 whatever, right? I claim that we can reduce risk by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the case may be. And this is what the outcome's going to be for us as a business, right? Simple marketing. Use marketing skills to tell your story.
See, those marketers are valuable for something.
They are. Pain, claim, gain.
There you go. Pain, claim, gain. Learn it, folks. Present it. All right. These next 3 articles get into some interesting topics. So this first one, why is cybersecurity particularly prone to having toxic bosses? Now, I haven't experienced this, so I was a little, when I saw this article come up, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I haven't run across this kind of.
I did not. I know some really nice people who are CISOs. Like some of the nicest people you'll meet can be CISOs, right? There's assholes in every industry,
of course,
right? Like,
and that, in all honesty, I was going to say I really haven't seen this in the CISO community, but there are toxic employees, and I always take the baseball analogy of cancer in the clubhouse. You could have one of the best players in the world in your clubhouse, but if they're toxic, they become a cancer. So for me, it's always fail fast. I've always taken the approach of fail fast. If there's toxicity in your group, you need to fail fast, get that toxicity out of the group. That way it's not eking across the rest of the team.
Yeah, because I've seen it in other roles.
Yeah.
All the way up the
Absolutely.
chain of command, right? But I really haven't seen this at a CISO level. And I was like, why is this article just focus on the CISO? Because I think there's a ton of lessons learned from other toxic bosses in the environment than a toxic CISO.
No one said sales ever.
Right. Truth to that.
We can't fire Bob. He brings in too much revenue. And that you're 100% right. Like you get a person who's a cancer in the org and it makes it difficult for everybody else.
Yep. Exactly. Which leads us into the essence of integrity and leadership, a pillar of trust and excellence article. Here, obviously, it's again, I think this is order. I'm going through this and I'm like, wait, shouldn't I setting my own ethical standards first before I start thinking about building trust and credibility? Like, I have to have a baseline foundation, don't I, as a person to create trust and transparency and credibility? Like, I have to have an ethical compass.
Dead on. Self-awareness and who you are is definitely key to all this. It's the beginning to every single one of these, whether it's fostering transparency and openness or, having that long-term success, because that's going to require relationships. Trust and credibility, at the end of the day, if you're not following your own values and you're not following your own ethical standards, your trust and credibility is going to be gone. So you have to model the way and lead by example. Otherwise, it's all gone. So dead on, Matt. That is number one. Everything else falls in line.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, almost building trust and credibility is an outcome of doing the other 4 things well, to me, right? Because you've got to earn trust and credibility. It 100%. Doesn't just happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's an outcome of all of if you're doing the other things well.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. All right. Last one. Alarming decline in cybersecurity job postings in the U.S. Now, Ben, you've been seeing this trend for a while. You've been talking about it a little bit. You have been saying, "Hey, I don't think we have a skill gap problem because nobody's hiring. Like something's going on." This article is actually giving us numbers on the decline in the number of job postings in the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah, I hear this a lot, right, from peers. I talk to recruiters out there. I hear the same kind of thing. It's just the market is down. My own feeling is I attribute it back to the economy.
Yeah.
Companies trying to figure out, look, there's uncertainty right now. There's a lot of inflation. There's just a negative feeling about the economy. I don't. No matter which way you come out on it, I think it's dishonest to say that there's not a general malaise about how things are feeling from an economic
Hmm.
standard for most people. So as a result, people aren't getting the budget to hire on the security side, right? And I think companies are looking at, well, can we get by without stuff? What can we get by without? Well,
Hmm.
maybe we're not going to hire those security hires that we planned on. Maybe the CISO will hire at VP or director level or worse, right? Um, yeah, I just think it there was a really good motion for a while, and in the last like year and a half, 2 years, I think it's really hit some road bumps.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask that question too because the article really didn't drive into um, the factors as to why. I mean, it hinted toward it, but it didn't really get deep. And that's the question I was going to ask: is it the economy? Is it the feeling toward where the economy is going? I do know, starting in 2024, businesses are tightening their belt, right? I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Inflation. Everybody's scared of where inflation is heading, right? So, they're just tightening the belt and not spending as much. And some of these numbers kind of indicate where they do have the opportunity to spend, where their spending is more on the reactive defensive side versus the proactive side. You can see, where response roles increased, but everything else did not. Right. So it's where we can't afford to spend a little bit of money, we'll spend it on the defense.
Yeah, obviously we've seen this downturn in the market. Now,
Mhm.
maybe the market numbers don't show it, but look, we've had a ton of layoffs.
Yep.
We've seen tightening of budgets, consolidation of vendors across the stack, right? So there's definitely an economic component to this. But then when you look at some of the things around the SEC reporting requirements, some of this other stuff, you would think that some of the governance,
Mhm.
protective, proactive stuff would be important to making sure you're prepared
Yeah.
to respond in 4 days, have a plan,
Sure.
understand how you're going to report materiality. But I don't see that in these
Well,
numbers,
but there's
right?
there's missing information too, right? Because it says, in general it dropped 69%. But how is that in comparison to all other hiring? That's a key indicator for global economics right there. How we're faring globally compared to other hiring, right? Other hiring data. I'd like to see that number compared to everything else. Where do
Yeah,
we
I think
fall?
that'd be really interesting because we're seeing
Totally.
we're seeing layoffs, right? Like
Yes.
Tesla just laid off a bunch of people, right?
Exactly.
Kind of unexpectedly, which I always thought was weird because layoffs are usually unexpectedly. It's not like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
broadcast them
right.
6 months ahead of time. Hey, you're gonna be laid off, so just hang around
Yes.
for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I think we're seeing that where people are just
Mhm.
uncertain about what's going on, and then top that off like we're coming up into the election. I think people are really like,
Right.
geez, there's just not a lot of good signs on the market. There were some numbers that just came out recently said that inflation was headed in the wrong direction again this quarter when it
Mhm.
looked like it might be trending better.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think just market economics are,
Yeah, I
are a
would I
big
would
part of it.
love I would love to see this compared to everything else, right? And see if we're still at least the top of the pile of garbage versus everything else, and that at least we know we're still maintaining some type of, focus. If we're just totally, dropping down the toilet compared to everybody else, then that's worse information for me, right? That means
Now,
that means businesses are forgetting that cybersecurity is a
well,
strategic
that being
component of
said,
their
right?
business.
So if you take all that into account and hiring's down, like one of the biggest concerns that I have is when you combine that and think about the board level concern about like what are the risks to the organizations, I would be uber concerned about this. Like
Yeah.
it's telling me that actually we're taking our eye off the ball on defensive methods. And if you think about ransomware just as kind of being in the news recently and a huge deal, So the Change Healthcare incident, that was $22 million that they paid in a ransom, right? But the total impact right now is $1.6 billion,
Mm-hmm.
right? 1.6 billion with a B. That's a big number.
Yep.
I'm really guessing. I think I posted this on LinkedIn a couple of times. I'm guessing that that number is larger than the ask that the cyber team made for investment in
Yeah.
2024. So
Right.
I just think that people need to realize that the payoff is there, and this is real stuff. Like, we're not seeing this decrease, right? This
Mhm.
is this is continuing to rise. Ransomware is a huge thing. Malicious actors and threats are a huge thing. Like, it's not as if this is going away. So, if you could say that, hey, we don't have to worry about this risk because, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's just not an issue anymore, great. But when the risks are increasing and the threats are growing, I think you need to make the investment. I'm really surprised the industry right
Yeah.
now is doing this.
Yeah, I mean, again, if there's anybody out there in the audience who can get some research data or workforce data from the federal government, I'd love to see how cyber compares to everything else. Let's do that trend as an industry and see where we fall. That'll be some really good information to lean into.
Yeah. It'll give us at least an idea of whether people are still serious about
Mm-hmm.
cyber or not,
Yep.
right? Because that's the I think the fear and the worry is that
Exactly.
we're not addressing it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. Next week is RSA conference, but don't worry, we have a great pre-recorded Say Easy, Do Hard segment on Train How You Fight with Malcolm Harkins. If we don't see you next week at RSA conference, and we'll see you in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.